But if we had to predict, are they going to defy an order at some point? They've certainly used rhetoric that seemed to suggest that they ought to, and they're getting pressure from their folks and their base to start defying the orders of judges. And the president has for years attacked the judiciary. This goes back to his first term, probably even before, where when there's an adverse ruling, it's go after the judge, go after the president that appointed them, go after the unelected bureaucrats and so on.
Welcome to our latest episode of Trailblaze. This is where we talk about the America we are, the America we're becoming, and the America we want to be. I'm your co-host, Nayerra Huck.
Hi, I'm Jamal Simmons. So happy to be here today.
Oh, Jamal, I feel like every week we get to catch up on all the things that we've been confronting, but not necessarily processing. So I had almost an epiphany the other day as I was reading all of these different articles about what it means that this is 5 years since the COVID lockdown and how much we've changed, even though it was relatively in our lifespans a short period of time. And one of the things I thought of was because of COVID, we somewhat lost that ability to connect on a community level, and that human interaction became so digital, so much more remote. How much of that is then leading to the rise of all these internet conspiracy theories? Trump was there before COVID, but I just feel like so much of what he has to tell people was designed to take advantage of this. We only live online. And now that's why we're having a hard time with how to respond, because we're not used to that in-person response anymore.
Absolutely true. I think what Trump did was he hyperpowered something that was already happening, right? So we already had social media. We already had people, teleworking from time to time. But, Zoom became a real thing during the COVID outbreak. We all got used to doing it. Think about television. You and I do television a lot. How many people now do television hits from home or from their office via a remote app versus having to go into a studio? You could never do cable or network television from like a home camera prior to COVID. And now people do it all the time. So you miss all the casual interaction with the host. You missed all the casual interaction with your co-panelists or makeup artists or anything else that might give you context. And it's just you leaving your one room A and going into room B and sitting in front of a camera.
Same thing, that there's like such an opportunity because they were able to bring in more voices, people who couldn't necessarily show up to a studio at midnight like we have. You can include them. But the challenge then is that those voices don't actually have to interact with each other in a human way before the conversation or after, right? They perform for the television. And it's been similarly at work, right? The similarly even in healthcare, great opportunities for more collaboration, for bringing in new people and getting people comfortable. But it prioritizes the people who are really only comfortable behind a screen and have a hard time reading cues or dealing with other people's feelings and emotions in real time. And I say this in the context also of knowing that there was a high school generation and an early college generation where they just missed so many of these what are considered rites of passage, whether it's prom or senior trips or student orientation at college, that are about coming together and commemorating and building a shared experience. So the shared experience and not having that, there's been so many studies now on that cohort of students and how they're socially struggling now that the world has come back alive.
Yeah, you may know this. Everybody knows this in some level. The reason why Mark Zuckerberg changed the name of Facebook to Meta is because he's trying to build the metaverse, right? His idea is that there will be both a virtual and or augmented reality that we all live in, that Meta will help be the kind of the platform for it, right? So you will then remember what was it called? One Life, or it was like the Second Life. Everybody would go to Second Life, in like 10 or 15 years ago. But the idea is you'll be able to go into like your Facebook, you put on your glasses, your virtual reality glasses, you go into Facebook as like a real actual place, right? And so people live on blocks and you will be able to knock on the door or like ping them and then they'll come on. And you know what's weird? I used to think there was some alternate universe we'd all live in, or we didn't just live in like reality. We'd be in our own little cubicles, right? You'd never actually see another person. You'd live in your own cubicle. You'd like have food that would like come to you in a chute, and you'd live in a, you never actually, have contact with other person. And then I met this guy once. I was in San Francisco. They were creating a suit, like clothing, that would give you physical sensation based on like your augmented reality or virtual reality self. So if you touch something and it was hot, it would be hot. The glove would be hot to your touch for your finger. And obviously there are sex aspects to this, right? So you could actually,
of course, that's the first place it goes
with somebody, right? Of course, everybody's
of course it
there. You could actually have sex in your pornography world. So you would never actually need to really touch another person. This feels like the kind of world that we're going to, where you don't actually have to interact with people, and it only ever really gets worse. And Trump built an entire political movement, I think, off of changing people's perceptions about what they experience online, not what they experience by talking to real human beings.
And then to add on to that, the concern about whether young people are growing up more anxious, it's because they haven't had that day-to-day practice of human interaction that allows you to regulate your body. So your biology is now disconnected from your social experience. The rise of the incel movement, right? I'm involuntarily celibate. I'm like, well, okay, there's a solution for those guys with in the metaverse, because again,
right,
the sex prioritizes everything.
As someone told me, people will hack everything for love and sex, right?
Yes.
So hack any app for it.
But that universe is not one that is governed or has a set of social rules that we all signed up for voluntarily, right? We clicked on it and we jump into that universe. Yeah. Same way that we jump into any of our apps. We don't know really what rights we're giving up, what we're allowed to do and not. That metaverse gets controlled by Zuckerberg, right? Those are the rules.
The other part of it, right? It captures not just what's allowable today. It's like in the future, there may be something else that you did 15 years ago, which in the future people decide is no longer tolerant. We no longer let you do that. We don't let people with left hands drive cars anymore, right? But you are a left-handed person and you drove a car, for years. And so now that's illegal. But all these things are clocked in the metaverse. They're all like online. And so it's not even just what you do or click on, it's how long your eyes spend looking at something, right? So if a screen comes up and you look at a purse for like 3 seconds, now the screen knows you actually like something about that purse. And now you'll see another version of that will keep showing up as you window shop through your online experience.
Yeah, so it's taking what we do with our reels and videos right now, which is 3 seconds on a video. Then that's why you start seeing lookalike videos and more on that similar topic. And it translates that into your reality. The crazy thing is, they are now taking those principles and the wish for that world and trying to translate it into, the physical realm which is governed by a constitution, which is governed by certain sets of social norms and standards and beliefs about how we should be interacting. And they would rather have the universe online be what governs. They want that to be dominate, not the other way around.
Correct. Because as you started off with this, you can create whatever reality you want for each individual person. And so if you have enough power online, you don't have to worry about somebody running into their cousin on the, as they leave their house or their classmate when they're in school. You create every bit of interaction for them and manipulate it so you can have them think whatever it is you want them to think.
You don't need any elected officials. You don't need any representation, right? When you have ultimate control in that universe.
Yeah. And then all the control goes to the people who you have decided, the whatever powers that run that universe have decided they want people to follow. And that's where you end up investing and listening to, all their opinions. It's a dark world.
Yeah. This makes a lot more sense than of how the tech bros, right? Their vision for what the country, their physical world should look like, because it is based on how they would design the metaverse, which does not involve give and take or inclusion or anything that we recognize as the tools of democracy.
Someone told me just before I know we have a great guest that's about to come in. Someone told me that in the in the Zuckerberg vision of the meta glasses and the augmented reality, right? So this is, you're still in the physical world, but they are augmenting your reality by placing things there, right? Like one day you won't actually have a television on your wall. You'll just have a projection of a television on your wall and you'll watch it. But in the meta world, you'll be able to go down the street, and if you see a person, they're a stranger to you. You never met them before in your life, but it will automatically facial recognition them and then bring up their social media pages. And so you'll say, oh, here's Nayerra Haq, and Nayerra has kids, and Nayerra has a husband, and Nayerra lives in this state, and she works in these places. And so your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your Instagram pages all come up at the same time. So there literally are no strangers. Right? Because every person you see on the street, you can identify.
It's the idea of there's just that the surprise, the je ne sais quoi, the serendipity that can happen from in real life human interaction, and also then the emotional connection that you develop from that does disappear. If we're, and it's crazy to me that COVID now, I mean, I blipped it from my brain to be real, but was a relatively short period of time. But it's like, what, 1.5 year lockdown, 2 year, such a long lasting impact on us socially, on our development, on the direction of our politics and society. Yet there were some countries where they understood how to do micro lockdowns, ranging from South Korea to Pakistan. They never had to shut down. Right? Can you imagine? Like, they just don't have any of these after effects.
There's some states, right? I mean, Alabama.
Like, that's great.
Right? Florida in some ways. Like, they kind of skirted the whole rule. They would tell us we were all wrong. So we got a new guest. We're excited. Nayerra, do you want to bring in
This is our friend. Our friend, you've seen him on CNN. He's a radio host, and his name is Elliot Williams, known for his legal analysis, which is built on real life experience. At one point, he was a lawyer with ICE and Department of Homeland Security. So we thought Elliot would be really great to bring on as our special guest today to give us some context and piece together some of what we're seeing right now about what it means to have rights, what it means to have rights under the Constitution in theory versus what's going on right now. Jamal, that sound about right?
Can I just say about Elliot for a second before we get started? I've known Elliot for a long time. This is dangerous, right? Because Elliot and I used to sit, we worked together in the same office. We literally sat like I could probably throw a peanut and hit Elliot in the back of the head if I wanted to. Like the two bald black guys who sat pretty close to each other in the office. Elliot was also a federal prosecutor, which I always wondered, like, does Elliot know all the crazy ways to go after everybody? Like, is he the guy who could tell you every crime anybody could ever commit? So I'd always be like, so Elliot, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? He was kind of my go-to guy on anything criminal.
One great way is you get them on a podcast. Basically, you get people to just record some words, and that's just beautiful evidence and often just circumvents the hearsay rule. So keep talking, Jamal, in your cool, funky jacket. Yeah, no, it's on.
Yeah, no, Jamal's already confessed to minor assault of throwing items at your head. I'm not sure what that did to your brain power over the years.
He literally just confessed to a crime. So and it wouldn't have been a federal crime unless I were, sitting inside a mailbox or something. But the idea is there. So anyway,
maybe if we were on an airplane. Maybe if we were on an airplane.
No, you could do that.
It's interstate, right?
So speaking of airplanes, let's talk about immigration a little bit. And, Nayerra, to your question about what does it mean to have rights, pull back a little bit. A lot of these immigration matters have been in the news over the last 68 days or however long it's been as we're aging in Trump years. But, two things can be true at the same time. It can be true that someone is a violent predator or someone ought not be in the United States or someone ought not be welcome in this country for any host of reasons, right? And removing that person could violate federal law. It can be true that someone really shouldn't be here, and I will be the first to say that. Many people will not what those words come out of their mouth. But no, there are folks that we don't want in the country. If you're part of a violent gang in another country, a transnational gang, you don't belong here in the United States, full stop. But it can also be the case that, like everyone else, those folks are entitled to free speech rights in the country, due process, and whatever else. And I do think the Trump administration has been masterful with immigration in picking their battles. And if you notice, the most recent fight over the gang members from South and Central America.
Yeah, Elliot, can you hold on? Elliot, can you just set that up for a little bit?
Yeah.
We do, there was a plane load. There's the of people who were taken out of the country. Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Can you just set up the context for just what happened?
There's two pieces of context, right?
Like,
yeah, there's a bunch of pieces of context. So okay,
so let me
hold on.
Let me just start,
Nayerra.
Yeah, there's two pieces of context here. So let me start with the facts that the facts were evolving too, as we know. But
Yes,
basically,
always.
Venezuelans who had temporary protected status, so they had a legal status in the United States. We find out through headlines, 300 something of them have been deported and have been accused of being gang members. That's what the rest of us in the universe find out. Elliot, what do you know about what happened?
Right. So at some point, folks get on a plane to get out of the United States. Department of Homeland Security apprehends them or makes the decision to remove them from the United States. Simultaneously, a judge has a hearing, issues a ruling first from the bench, and then a written ruling saying, number one, if planes are in the air, turn them around and bring them back. And number two, if they're not in the air, don't take off. A few hours later, the Department of Homeland Security and the state say, whoopsie, these guys are already now in, I believe it was Nicaragua and Venezuela, but forgive me if I got the countries wrong. Point being, there's an open question as to whether the administration violated a court's order, a directive from a federal court to bring people back to the country or not expel people from the country, just to give the judge time to answer the question that Nayerra is raising. Who are these folks? Were they removed with proper process? Are they actually gang members? All of the above, whatever it might have been. And when I say that the administration has been masterful, we are here talking about the due process rights of suspected gang members. Now, again, to Nayerra's point, they may not be gang members. They may be grandma, tia, y abuela, who happen to be from Venezuela. We don't know that. But the simple fact is the administration has put this chum in the water that these folks are gang members. Maybe they are. And most people are going to hear that and say, oh, whoa, why are we fighting about due process? And back to my central point, it can both be the case that someone ought to be expelled from the United States, but also that their expulsion was improper and violated a court's order.
Right, because how we do a thing matters as much as the thing that we want to do. So if we decide, I mean, look, it could very well be, the case I've heard is there are some people who are smuggled to the United States by gangs, and maybe they were being intimidated. Maybe they had tattoos to identify them if they were moving along the process in some way. And so they look like a gang member on paper. They look like a gang member in casual contact. But if you actually investigate their lives and what happened to them, it's a much more complicated scenario. But we don't know that anymore, and we won't know that because they've been disappeared.
Yeah, and back to, use another example of an instance that came up recently. Columbia University, a professor or someone who was now president of the United States on a green card, accused of being a supporter of Hamas, and with steps taken to remove the individual from the country. Now, the fight, we're losing the thread here, which is that the government has quite broad discretion when dealing with visas and taking them away and so on. But to the extent that this individual is being punished for free speech, for the exercise of free speech in the country, even if it is uncomfortable speech, to Jamal's question, what is to stop an administration from saying, well, we're now just going to start removing immigrants or people who are unlawfully present who, I don't know, disagree with the country's policy on Ukraine, or disagree with other foreign policy matters, or disagree with our tariffs, or so on. It becomes a slippery slope, I think, into policing speech. Now, I don't. Again,
well, it's even worse, Elliot. It's worse in this aspect. I don't want to get too fantastic, but it is possible Also, like we knew a guy here in New Jersey who was picked up because he was with other people who were here without status, but he was a United States citizen. He was a veteran, right? They chose to ignore that. It is possible that someone could have been taken who was not at all affiliated with this. But the problem here is, one, we don't know because they didn't do due process. And two, they ignored a federal judge. Those are the two things that are really pertinent here.
And so
right?
to add on to that, this is where it becomes the broader masterful project, which is finding these little just gaps in time, the time it takes a judge to decide a case, the time it takes to find out somebody has been picked up from police custody and moved entirely to another state, right? All of that, these gaps in time to push forward a narrative that is built on security, right? So it's terrorist group, it is gang members, right? So put out that narrative and then eliminate the question of, well, this person has rights and legal status in the United States, a green card holder, people who were welcomed and given refugee status. Like these are people the government said, you count. This isn't undocumented folks, right? This is a totally different ballgame of what they're chipping away at. And because the system takes time, especially the immigration system, by the time you find out what the story is, by the time you get legal representation, this person's life's already been changed. It's already been altered and precedent has been set.
Yeah, and I also think, well, two things. One, we ought to leave open the possibility that, whoever the guy might be, might actually be a terrorist, might actually be a gang,
and I want
whatever.
Terrorists off, right?
Right.
I want
right.
But listen, guys, I got to jump in here as being somebody from from this community that often the first thing we have to do is say, I'm not a terrorist.
Sure.
They knew exactly who they were picking and why.
Yes.
It was not green card holder who is a Canadian and blonde.
Sure.
Right? Because this is the low hanging fruit. The narrative takes over.
When
Venezuelan gang members and rapists, right? So I feel like we've done a lot of caveating that potentially, I get it. And I know why we do that. But let's move on from the caveating that these people could be bad guys and look at what it means.
But if they are bad guys, I don't want rapists and murderers on the street either.
Let's look at what it means when they do things like this without following the process, what that means for regular law-abiding people.
When I say the guy, I'm not referring to any of the specific folks we're talking about here. It's the open-ended question, which is, and the three of us all speak on television and have all shot from the hip at least once on something where more facts came out later, and not even in the immigration context, on anything where it's sort of more facts can come out where we don't know. And I just put that caveat out there. Having dealt with intelligence briefings and reports, and as you have too, Nayerra. However, the administration's been pretty clear of being at least curious about defying court orders, if not, they're sort of court order curious, experimenting with defying court orders from a little period in college where they're just trying it out. But no, it's, my former colleague, Tom Homan, said just yesterday, I don't care what the judge says. Stephen Miller was on CNN recently, one just blasting the judge and the judge's authority to even rule in this area, calling it squarely within the purview of the executive and so on. So I just, even setting aside this debate over liberty, security, who's who, how do we label people and so on. No, they've actually made clear that at some point, I don't want to get in the world of making predictions, but if we had to predict, are they going to defy an order at some point? They've certainly used rhetoric that seemed to suggest that they ought to, and they're getting pressure from their folks and their base to start defying the orders of judges. And the president has for years attacked the judiciary. This goes back to his first term, probably even before, where when there's an adverse ruling, it's go after the judge, go after the president that appointed them, go after the unelected bureaucrats and so on. And you're hearing it now that these judges who were elected by no one are now telling us who we can and can't. So are you now saying that a judge could tell us troop movements and so on? So this is right. So this is there's an argument
I think that they're trying to make the argument that this happened over international waters. I think we've now sort of factually realized some of these planes were still in the United States. But if it happens over international waters, it doesn't apply. That's the most asinine, ass backwards thing I've ever heard.
It is back asswards. It is back asswards, and here's why. If we're on, if one of these guys is on a deportation flight and punches an agent, a federal agent on the plane, you can't tell me that the U.S. isn't going to figure out a way to charge that guy with assault under American law. That somehow the mere fact that it was over international waters takes away all American jurisdiction. That's particularly when it's in American property that's flying them. That's silly, and they've tried to walk that back a little bit because it's such an asinine argument.
Well, they're basing that on this idea, though, right? When you come to the border, and we're seeing this with a lot of folks who, not U.S. citizens, but green card holder, which are longtime residents, people coming back from having, done a stay abroad and now coming back. They have multiple entry visas. That at that border, your rights don't start yet until you're let in. That's the thing. They don't start until you're let in. So if they can say, they can look at your phone, they can say what they want, they can detain you for 15 hours if they want. This happened to a kidney transplant surgeon at Brown that she just got. They're just like, now we're gonna send you back to Lebanon. Because why? Because they said, we found some stuff that says that you support Hezbollah. Again, throw a terrorist or a gang label on it, and you don't have to deal narratively with any of the legal implications of this. How does this then connect, right? You see this defying court orders, trying to use the wiggle room in the law about where rights start and where they end. How does that translate to the conversation that's being had about birthright citizenship?
Goodness. I think there's a populist thread running through America now, not limited to the Republican Party, that has given rise to this America First movement. Now, that's certainly pushed by President Trump, but it traverses the right and left too, or at least the Republican adjacent and Democratic adjacent voters. Just look at the vote totals from the 2024 election. People are buying this idea that America ought to be first, and several elements of that are: number one, restricting immigration; number two, restricting who gets to be called American; and number three, getting people out of the country. Not at a faster rate than before. The Obama administration and Biden, I believe Biden administration, I could be wrong, had removed more folks by this point in the administration, I think, based on the number of border crossings there had been. However, the rhetoric is just different this time. This is the third one is English as the national language of America, which by English executive order the president. Yeah, and it's all part of this populist nativist thread running through America right now that's growing, or has grown in the last few years.
So what we've discovered is that Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, he spoke on October 27th. He got up in front of Madison Square Garden and said, "When was America great again?" And he said it was around 1900. Was when America was great. 125 years ago, we had more money than we could deal with. Tariffs were great. So this was their economic policy, right? To go back to the Gilded Age, right? Where really rich people had most of the money and were making all the decisions for the country. By the way, women couldn't vote. Black people were being lynched, but that's a different story. But their question about who's citizen goes back to an even earlier age. Right, but it goes back to an even earlier age. This is prior to the 14th Amendment. So we're talking about 1865, 66, when these questions are on the table about birthright citizenship, which was passed in order to make sure that we freed slaves were going to be citizens of the country. But it also had a sideways implication, was that it helped immigrant whites who were coming from Europe. Right. So here's the challenge. Every time we deal with what happens in with people of color and Black people in the country, we actually also end up helping other people. Affirmative action helps white women, birthright citizenship helps immigrant whites. But now we want to roll all this stuff back. So America is great when it didn't have people that we didn't think were supposed to be here.
Yeah. And moreover, when you look at, let's talk about birthright citizenship again, the fact that the last case to seriously have addressed this, I believe, is 1898, or it's late in the 19th
Right.
century. And somebody asked me why. I said, because it's fucking obvious. That's why. And it hasn't come up in a meaningful way in over a century, because it's a pretty basic concept that we have accepted as Americans. Now, you can try to read these fringe theories into the Constitution that the clause in the 14th Amendment, it's all people born in the United States shall be citizens, and those who are subject to the jurisdiction of America. And you can say that people who are unlawfully present in the country are not. So, okay, well,
but of course they're subject to the jurisdiction of America,
well,
because if they commit a crime, they're going to be subject to the laws of committing that crime.
It is sort of ridiculous that. If they commit a crime, they could be paying taxes in the country. There are any number of ways in which the United States is exercising jurisdiction over them. And it's really an aggressive argument. Now, I'm not going to say it's completely frivolous, because maybe it wins in the courts. I don't know, because it hasn't happened in 150 or however long. But I tried to make that point to someone the other day, that if you look at everything else that is a central legal issue, abortion, the death penalty, marriage, miscegenation, all of them, they come up every 10 or 20 years, because in some regards, they're complicated, fraught questions, which there might even be some legal debate as to. That's why they keep coming up. The birthright citizenship question just hasn't come up meaningfully, because it's not a meaningful debate. And it's sort of this bright, shiny thing that is causing all of us here, even on these podcasts, to sort of debate. And it gets to the mastery of the Trump administration. Here we are debating the undebatable for the second time around.
The reason that, they bring it up is because the narrative is birthright citizenship is anchor babies, right? So undocumented people coming here and having their babies, as opposed to my parents who came here legally, worked hard, got their citizenship, had kids here, were born citizens. I will say, though, this is a very unique part of the American experiment. Many countries, and many of the countries the Trump administration admires, particularly in the Gulf, do not have birthright citizenship. So it is not the only way to create a country and to create a nation. If you are in Dubai, for example, you can have a 99-year lease. You are not allowed to buy land if you're not a citizen. You can have a company, but you have to have 51% have to be Emiratis in that job. So there are opportunities to make money and progress and advance, but you will never be a citizen unless your father, not even your mom, if your father was born a citizen. So they have all these rules. Really, what it does is it concentrates wealth, and it makes it nearly impossible for people who come in from other countries who are doing the labor to actually be seen as equal. This is not an accident that this argument is coming up.
Yeah.
This is the place where common sense conflicts with sexism and misogyny, because really, if you wanted to control who was going to be citizen, it would be matrilineal, because mama's baby, daddy's baby. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Elliot.
It's a good thing my babies look just like their dad, right? I mean, that helps.
there is very little doubt about your babies. No, the other thing is that using your example, Nayerra, of they're not thinking about my parents who did it a certain way.
Maybe they are. Maybe they are.
No. But listen, okay, let's not even say anchor baby. Imagine someone is unlawfully present in the country for any number of reasons, might have been here for a decade, and has a child. Now, perhaps they were not thinking about the citizenship, their child's citizenship status, their own, or whatever else. They just had a kid. People get pregnant all the time. But the extreme example is Mamacita from across the border, swimming across the Rio Grande when she's 8.5 months pregnant, dropping a kid and then running over the border. Back to this Tren de Agua, these gang members, they have picked the extreme example and made it the norm. Immigration in this country is not the high-skilled folks from Jamaica or Nigeria or wherever else coming in. It's guys with neck tattoos swarming across the border.
To your point,
yeah.
To your point, Elliot, the data point there is actually the anchor babies are not actually the mamacitas. The anchor baby challenge by the numbers are high net worth individuals from Eastern Europe and from China who come here, and they have in places like California these lounges and resort facilities, so you can enjoy your pregnancy and then have the American baby, the American citizenship, go back to whatever lifestyle you have, and guaranteed American university access. Or if you ever need to flee your country, you can come and find refuge in America. So even that anchor baby narrative, is the reality of it is also wealthy people taking advantage of the American system, not the ones who are desperate.
And by the way, I have lived in Washington and New York and Boston, these places. Let me tell you, nobody's worried about the Eastern European waitresses and people who are populating a lot of these places. And I have a friend who actually ended up, having a child with a woman from Eastern Europe who was not here legally, and then had to spend thousands of dollars trying to deal with her status afterwards after they had their child. But this is a real thing.
We haven't shamelessly hawked my upcoming book yet. About it. And there's a reason why I'm shamelessly hawking it here. It's coming out early next year, about the 1984 New York subway vigilante shooting, where Bernard Goetz shoots 4 black teenagers. And something I get into in the book is that it's a lot about fear and the prevailing fears of a society. In the 1980s, particularly 1980s New York, but 1980s generally, it was the black super predator. And it was the idea of this gangbanger from the Bronx or the Queens or Brooklyn, who was out to do whatever with crack cocaine and kill you. That fear of black crime is not the same today as it was back then. The fear now, the sort of nebulous fear, is of the folks coming over across the border. And it has replaced, in political parlance, in social discussion, whatever else, it has replaced the black super predator. That term was a term of the 1980s and 1990s. But as the nebulous, meany thing that exists in society, that is taking the extreme example and broadening it and nationalizing it. There was probably, there were black teenagers who committed crimes and engaged in acts of violence, but it got imputed to a whole population with drastic, tragic consequences through the 1980s and 1990s. And you're, to an extent, seeing it now with a totally different population.
Can I ask you one more question, which I said I wasn't going to ask you, because I think it's, again, one of the most, this is like, I'm falling for the bait. And so I'm just going to do it because, we all live where we are. None of us are innocents here. Trump threw out a piece of bait yesterday that everybody chewed on, and I just want to get your definitive take on it.
Kennedy Center? Kennedy Center, is it going to get Cats or Phantom of the Opera? No.
Not the Kennedy Center.
Lee Greenwood?
No, this is the the Auto 10 pardon question, which I think is grounded in almost nothing. But I want you to disabuse any listeners whether or not Joe Biden actually issued legal pardons to the January 6th Commission.
Well, you took the bait, Jamal.
I did. But I want people to know. You got to put the right information out there.
It's a bullshit red herring issue. Number one, we've all, the three of us, worked for elected officials or appointed officials at some point. Everybody's got an auto pen. And no one in the White House seems able to answer if Donald Trump has ever used an auto pen. The answer is, well, I've only ever seen President Trump sign executive orders by hand. Do you know how many things a president signs? I got, like, Elliot, when I was 16, got a written letter from the president when I got Eagle Scout. So do you think Donald Trump is signing all that shit? No, he's not. And it's a duty of the president. So the idea that somehow the mere existence of an auto pen in the White House sort of negates any action taken by Joe Biden is foolish, number one. Number two, I do genuinely wonder how long Donald Trump can keep talking about Joe Biden. Now, it might be 4 years, but at a certain point, it's Pottery Barn, man. You broke it, you bought it, and the country is yours. You are the president of the United States. And it just seems odd, this obsession with looking back to the person who lost the presidency fair and square to you, for a host of, and frankly, on substance. People liked what you were selling for whatever reason, this obsession with Joe Biden. Number three, and to just be the lawyer for a moment, the pardon power is far and away the most unreviewable, buck wild power any president has. Every president uses it for some crazy shit and pardons people that probably shouldn't be pardoned. But you can't really do anything about it. So even if he did sign him with an auto pen, let's pretend for a moment that Donald Trump's craziness is actually reality. So he signed a document. If merely by making the proclamation, it has the force of law, far more than any other power the president has, more than whether it's appointment power or signing bills or whatever else. So this idea, this whole discussion is just nonsense.
I love the idea that a digital signature or any non-handwritten signature invalidates a legal contract. I'm like, wow, guys, welcome to everything that we do, even home purchases right now. I mean, how many things get signed where, all of those things. I'm like, you really want to go there? Is that really where you want to go, real estate man?
And moreover, back to the fight over immigration, this whole question of whether when a judge issues a ruling orally versus verbally, and it wasn't clear what he'd said. When a judge says you're guilty, you go to jail. When a judge says, I sentence you to 10 years, you go to jail for 10 years. Now, often they will write something afterward. But this idea that we're now nitpicking over the actions of these appointed officials that we've trusted for the 249 years of our nation's existence is just remarkable.
Again,
I want to thank...
it's going to turn around on them, right? The idea of nitpicking, it's just, all right, if that's the new game.
Turnaround is fair play. You're right.
I want to thank Elliot for joining us. I learned a lot today, but the thing that I
Did you learn a lot today?
I did. And the thing that I just learned that I did not know, but I should have assumed, is that Elliot was an Eagle Scout. He dropped that.
Well, Elliot is an Eagle. It's a lifetime honor, my friend.
Like being a Marine.
I know, right? I'm not a Marine. This is all this is all cut and run. But
it's like once a Marine, always a Marine.
Once an Eagle Scout, always an Eagle Scout.
All right. Well, thank you. This is a pleasure having you here. We did learn a lot. We're going to circle back with you again to get more data later, because you are one of the Legal Eagles experts that I listen to. When you're on television, I stop and I pay attention.
Aww,
so thanks for being here.
That's kind of you.
Listen to.
All right.
No, sometimes. Yeah. It's funny because I paused. This is not evident from the audio, but I paused and looked at Nayerra, and she just looked at her camera like.
Elliot and I are more we're text buddies. We'll trash talk on we'll trash talk on text based on what is going on TV. I like that. I like that part of our relationship.
Yes. Yeah. No. Yeah. We got that.
All right. Thanks, everybody.